Hello, everybody. My name is Mirko Novakovic. I am co-founder and CEO of Zero, and welcome to Code Red. Code, because we are talking about code, and Red stands for requests, errors, and duration, the core metrics of observability. On this podcast, you will hear from leaders around our industry about what they are building, what's next in observability, and what you can do today to avoid your next outage. Hi, everyone. Today, my guest is Eli Cohen. Eli is the co-founder and CEO of Helios, an applied observability platform for security and monitoring insights. Helios was recently acquired by Snyk, where Eli is now Director of Product Management. I'm excited to have you here today, Eli.
Thank you, Mirko. I'm excited to be here also.
Yeah, and we always start the podcast with one question, and that's your Code Red moment. Do you have any special one in your career? Probably.
Yeah, definitely. So, I started my career from engineering, but then I moved to the dark side of product. And during one of the startups I worked with, I've always been a startup guy. I was working for a fintech company, and we handled like millions of transactions a day, right? For billions of dollars. It was a system like microservices. Everything was fragmented. It was really like the new style like we do today. Like every service is responsible for one thing, and eventually you hope that they all connect together really, really well. And when it turned out that we changed something in the logic of one of the inner services, and we tested it as a black box, as a white box. It was quite well, and we tested its service separately, and everything worked well. But when we deployed the code and it reached production, we suddenly realized that many transactions are going on wrong, and we had no idea what is going on. And apparently there was a side effect because we changed something that was quite well in service A, but it had a side effect not even on service B, but on service C. And then we realized, we have to do many, many, many end-to-end tests of this system for many different scenarios. And then we started to invest heavily in that because, we were sure that everything will work as expected. But, reality as it is was much more complicated because it was an edge case, and you can only see it based on real data. So eventually we had to start replicating all the data from production into a dummy account in our testing environment and simulate everything all over again. And this is also the phase where I realized, okay, like those are complex systems, microservices. You're going to end up in a very complex system, and you have to do many maneuvers to really make sure that everything is working as expected. And since we were dealing with money, which is what people really care about, it was a bit of a nightmare.
I can understand that. And was that one of the reasons to found Helios?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, I'm coming from a background in engineering, and to me almost it felt like such a burden to do all those kind of tests. Together, me and my co-founder Ran, who was the CTO, we realized there is a big pain about it, and especially for distributed architectures like the one we had back then in the fintech startup. And we realized this is really a pain, meaning I had to take some of the best engineers in my group and to let them write manual testing later on to automate it, to really, examine all of those edge cases and all of those scenarios, because distributed system is much more complicated than it used to be when you had single page application or like you had a monolith. And that was one of the aha moments when we realized, okay, testing distributed system is hard, and we kind of saw an opportunity within, open telemetry and leveraging tracing to build your testing architecture automatically based on that. So that was kind of like the initial idea.
I looked at the tool, and we had a few discussions on that, right? Because I also liked your tracing visualization looked pretty nice.
Correct.
And you over time pivoted into different categories also. So, but starting at the testing case, so you basically used a tracing technology to see what is happening in production, and then you allowed to basically use the payload of each individual span to create tests and then simulate, replay it with different test scenarios, correct?
Correct. So that's definitely what we did. We leveraged the tracing technology that we had. We enhanced all the payloads, and then we provided the user, first of all, with the capability to replay the same scenario, then to do some fuzzing. And on top of that, that was before, the generation of Gen AI, And LLMs, we also generated the code automatically for him, but obviously it wasn't comparable to what you can do nowadays.
So what does it mean? You could copy paste the code out of the tool and then into the IDE.
Exactly. So at first phase, it was very scrappy. You could copy paste it into your IDE. The beginning was Python and Node.js. Later on, later on you can also export it directly, like open API, check it into GitHub, or merge it, run it as part of Jenkins, definitely.
And you also had, as far as I remember, you developed your own agents, right? For Go, for example. So you spent a lot of time, like everyone who's in that space, at some point you invest heavily into some hardcore tech to instrument code and to inject something into runtimes, right? So as far as I remember, you spent a lot of time, or your CTO, I talked to him, that he had some really cool stuff around Go.
Yeah, definitely. So what we did back then is we realized that, creative testing is really cool, but OpenTelemetry, if you want to collect all the payloads and also to do it from many different systems, like Kafka and GraphQL, etc., then you have to collect the payloads yourself, because that's really important for the testing. And we realized that some of the pains for some of the development languages is the instrumentation takes too much of your time. Like, as time passed by, what we realized is that our customers were more exciting about our auto instrumentation capabilities and less about the testing, meaning they bought us for the testing, but at a certain phase, they didn't have enough time. It wasn't that much of a priority for them. Like, they kept neglecting the testing, but they were really exciting about the fact that you could, instrument your entire code base automatically for various languages. And I remember even one of our customers told me, like, it was the dev or the head of DevOps. He told me that's the first time we buy a product that I'm not involved in. So he is super excited about the fact that he could deploy and instrument everything, and he didn't require any DevOps or effort from platform. And that also laid the foundation for the second, like, I don't know if it's a pivot, but definitely kind of a pivot to be focused more on how we help organization automatically collect the data and ease the pain on the onboarding phase of tools like OpenTelemetry.
Yeah. And did you start with OpenTelemetry from day one, or did you start with an own tech and then move to OpenTelemetry?
So we started with OpenTelemetry with day one. At a certain phase, we also developed eBPF capabilities because we saw that the deployment over there is a lot easier, and for certain use cases, it was good enough. So yeah, we kind of leverage OpenTelemetry and later on also eBPF.
Yeah, OpenTelemetry makes sense. eBPF is a technology for listeners who are not familiar with them, which is basically is on the kernel level, right? And you get all the system calls, and then you can basically instrument on each call, right? You could intercept on the network level, you can intercept calls on the code level or wherever you want, right? So it's a kind of interesting technology to do instrumentation without the need of adding an agent per environment, right? Or per runtime, but you can really instrument on a kernel level, basically, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing. You can do it on a kernel-based level. So it was, it's obviously, all of our customers that were running Linux, it was great for them. And really what was the idea behind it is you can do, it's low effort instrumentation, right? The deployment is a lot easier. It is considered much more proficient, much more safe. So it was like for certain organization, it was no brainer, especially depends on the use cases. But then we can collect really deep level data with less burden, let's say that way.
That's what you mentioned was interesting for you as a testing use case. You need the payload, right? So most of the instrumentation libraries, also for OpenTelemetry, do not provide you with the full payload. If you do a HTTP call, for example, you want all the parameters, you won't get that out of the box, right? But if you want to do testing, that's the relevant data, right? Because if you want to replay a request without the payload, it doesn't make sense, right? So you need all the parameters, and then you need to be able to change the parameters and provide different fuzzy type of data so that you can do the test. So that was probably part of the engineering efforts you had to do, is collect all the payloads for different protocol levels and different libraries.
Yeah, and up until today, some of the contribution to OpenTelemetry, especially in Python, is, for example, with the integration we did for Kafka, later on also with GraphQL. At a certain point, we even added support for temporal, like all the queuing system, because that was especially when we saw that the pain is very big.
So pain for, that's interesting. So the pain for the customer to test it, or what was the pain? Or the pain to really instrument it?
So what we realized at a certain phase is that the pain for the customer to instrument was bigger, and also the appetite to really make sure the instrumentation is working was bigger than the testing phase. Because in the testing phase, for many organizations, unlike my case when it was, financial data and money was involved, for many customers, they don't have to have this really robust end-to-end system that is being tested nightly. For some of them, yes. And we saw less of an appetite to really generate tests automatically based on that. But they were quite eager about the capabilities we provided them with the other instrumentation, either with OpenTelemetry or eBPF. And then we realized there are many other use cases we can solve.
No, that makes sense. So basically you pivoted towards classical observability then from testing, right? And with a focus on tracing, as far as I understand, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the focus on tracing, on an easy onboarding, really cool UI. I think some of the things you do today with -0 actually. Which is also, I really like the idea.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, if you're in this space, you always look what others are doing, and a lot of the things are similar, but then everyone has some cool things, and you had this nice visualization of traces for sure, where you basically created something. It was a little bit like a map, right? And a flow from top to down, where you could see all the services that get called in a really nice way, and you could click on each of the nodes and get the details, right? That was basically your trace visualization.
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly, you could see all the different components of your system. You can click on them, you can expand, you can see all the data. And by the way, later on, when we identified the big gap in the AppSec domain, we leveraged the same technology, and this is now today embedded into Snyk. Like you can see all the different calls between the app, and to really understand, like with the context of Snyk, which is where we work today after the acquisition, is like all the different vulnerabilities.
Yeah, happy to discuss this more. I mean, I'm not that deep into the security, and especially all the acronyms are kind of, I don't understand all of them. There are
Impossible.
hundreds.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting, I was at KubeCon recently, so last week, and I went to the Viz booth, the company that also Israeli company, right? That I think grew from 0 to 400 million in, I don't know, 4 years or something, right? So I was quite curious what they are building. And one of the interesting parts, and maybe that's also what you saw, is that they use I'm not sure if they do it with tracing, but they have a dependency graph of the services. And so they basically understand if there's, for example, a vulnerability in a service, they can then check, okay, is that, for example, exposed to users on the internet? Or so they can basically, by using that graph and by understanding the dependencies, they can also better judge if a security issue or vulnerability is actually very critical or only critical, or is it only affecting internal systems? Does it affect data from customers, right? So I found that pretty interesting, that it's something that is pretty common in the APM space, right? In the application performance management space, but it seems to be quite a new approach in the security space, that you use tracing technology to understand dependencies and use that for scanning and understanding security issues.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And this is exactly the motivation. We are in the pivot that we did it, because at a certain phase we realized that, the market is getting very, very crowded. But then our customers were really, excited about the fact that you can deploy our technology with no need to involve DevOps, etc. And, in many cases, like the head of platform engineering also reports to the CISO. So, they saw we can really, really easily integrate into their system. And they told us, listen, there is another use case of maybe you can help us prioritize our vulnerabilities. And then we realized there is a big gap in that domain because all of the traditional, or let's say like the main companies that were statically analyzing your code, they had no data from the runtime. And as you said correctly, for us originally at the APM domain, this is quite trivial, right? I can tell you whether something is loaded, whether something is publicly accessible. Then we realized that once we integrate those runtime insights into the static scan of the code, we can provide you with valuable interest and valuable insights that are helping you do, first of all, this entire application graph, all the dependency graph, and also help you understand what do you need to prioritize, because you might have 10K vulnerabilities, but only a portion of them are actually loaded into memory, and only a portion of them really are accessible over the internet. And that's very significant when you look at that from the eyes and from the lenses of an AppSec persona that wants to understand what vulnerabilities and what issues should they tackle today. So that's kind of when we realize, okay, we have a really great technology, but we might even be more appealing in a different space. So we kind of, we leverage the technology we built, we change the product a bit, change the marketing a bit, change the sales a bit, and then realize that we have a very cool product in the AppSec domain that can really help companies and our customers do better prioritization based on data they were never exposed to. And thanks to the fact that, our deployment was very easy and just with a few clicks, then suddenly it became, really appealing.
Yeah, so did you pivot already to security then within Helios or after the acquisition? Or have you figured out the security part before that?
No, we figured it out before that. But then we realized it will be better to do, go to market with some of the big players out there. So we started partnerships with some of the big players out there that obviously understood that we have a very unique technology and a very unique product. And then we started doing POCs with their customers, our mutual customers. And with Snyk, it, quickly escalated into an M&A.
Tell us a little bit about that, right? I had the same situation with IBM, by the way. We also were partnering, and then one day somebody called me and asked me if we were open for an acquisition, and basically this thing started. So tell us a little bit how these things work, right? Did you get a call? I think Guy was also an angel investor, right, in Helios, one of the founders of Snyk.
Yeah, so Guy was also an angel investor, though he was out of the company by that phase, but definitely, so they've known us, the Snyk have known us for more than 2 years already, because they had a thesis about how you can leverage runtime signal for prioritization. So during their analysis and their drafting of the thesis, we met with their folks, to try to help them have better understanding of the domain, of the different technology, when you should use eBPF, when you should use OpenTelemetry, etc. And then at a certain phase, when we pivoted, we actually called them back and told them, listen, we are actually now really doing the things that we theoretically spoke about with you like 1 year ago or 6 months ago. Let's go and do a POC together with your customers. And they were super excited about it. And then at a certain phase, I got an invite from the corp dev for a meeting at Saturday. And this is when I realized, I told my wife, I don't think they're going to discuss partnership with me on Saturday. And from that, it's a topic for a different podcast.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right? Well, I think as far as I understood, one of your rationale was that you figured out that if you want to get, security is a very crowded and a space, that you figure out that working together with Snyk, who was already a pretty big company at the time, gives you more leverage to bring your technology into a lot of customers, right? Was that part of the story, or what was your rationale?
Definitely. So we saw that what we're doing makes a lot of sense, but we also saw that there is a big consolidation in the cybersecurity domain, and we identified Snyk as one of the obviously market leaders for that. And then for us, it felt natural because today, for Snyk today has more than 3,000 customers. So it was no-brainer. We knew we could take our technology and product and put it in the hands of millions of users. So, it was almost a no-brainer, to join forces with the market leader that is doing things from the static analysis perspective, combining our runtime insights, and then, giving the customer a full platform of capabilities was almost no-brainer. And I think they also identified that from their perspective, that they could onboard a team that is very strong, can do a lot of innovation, and help them close gaps that otherwise would have taken them probably 4 to 5 years,
And tell me a little bit what Snyk is doing. I mean, I know Snyk from the beginnings because we were founded by the investor. We were basically in the same fund of Excel. And that's how I got to know Guy at the beginning of Snyk. And I was at the beginning of Instana. And it was basically at that time, it was more or less, if I remember it correctly, they started more with JavaScript dependencies, right? So where they were checking libraries and comparing it to a vulnerability database. And so basically during, I would say, compile time on this CI/CD pipeline, they check the dependency. They would tell the developers, hey, you are using a library here that has in version XYZ that has some vulnerabilities. So we recommend you to update to a newer version of the library or a fix, right? And that's how they started.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
So that's how they started, from JavaScript and helping you identify vulnerabilities in open source packages. Then it evolved into first party packages, meaning scanning your own libraries and your own code and helping you identify vulnerabilities and security gaps. Then they also got into IIC and also to container. And the last product was, speaking of acronyms, is ASPM, is the application security posture management, which is kind of giving you the control plane over all of your different products and letting you run an effective application security program, meaning you can really know what to tackle first, where are your gaps, where are your blind spots, what do you need, to chase your developer to fix, and obviously to close the loop, meaning to help you already open up automatic pull requests for your developers, and help you fix all the issues that we find. And this is also where the Helios, product fits in, for helping, your application security people have better prioritization. We leverage the runtime insights.
The first part, as far as I understand, is more or less on static things, right? You run it against your code base, or you run it against your containers or images, and then you scan it, you scan the code, you scan the packages, compare it to vulnerability lists or these I think patterns that you are looking for, and then you do this during your CI/CD process, right? But where your product is actually running in production, right? It scans or it instruments the code that's running in production, and it gets a view of the production code. And so how do you map those production insights with the insights you get on the static libraries?
So it's a great question, and that's really quite a challenge, quite a technical challenge that we have. But we have some IP that we inside the company today that we know how to correlate between the assets that we find during production, during the runtime, and how to trace it all the back into your code and into your static code. And then we can tell you remember this, package and this vulnerability that we identified from repo X. Okay, we also saw it running in runtime. It is accessible over the internet. It is deployed it is loaded into your memory. So this is quite a difficult question that we have a lot of technology and a lot of IP today that we know how to correlate. And with this data, we can actually help, AppSec people tell them, okay, so you don't really need to handle 10K vulnerabilities right now. Let's start with the top 50 that are actually, more exploitable.
So it's really a little bit like what I saw at this, right? Getting the runtime view and then using that runtime data to prioritize which of the maybe it's hundreds or thousands of vulnerabilities that you can find.
Definitely.
And so it's used for prioritization based on things that are either exposed to critical users or to the outside, or prioritizing what's really loaded into memory, right?
Definitely, yeah.
That's interesting. And is it already delivered, or are you in development? Is it a product that I can buy, or?
No, it's a product that you can use. It's like our offering called UpRisk. This is our ASPM product. And it's available for the market to use, definitely.
Oh, interesting. And how does it work? Is it using eBPF these days, or is it based on your agent technology?
Depends on the customer. We mainly leverage eBPF, but for some cases we can also have our open telemetry. It really depends on the architecture. We want it to be relevant for every customer. That's why we don't tie ourselves to specific technology, but actually know how to tailor the solution for the specific customer.
One of the things you can see in this space is that observability and security in parts are merging together, right? You can see that now that Snyk acquired you guys, that's coming from the security side and acquiring observability technology. But you can also see that companies like Datadog or Dynatrace, they are adding more and more security features to their platforms. So definitely something you can see is happening in the market, and it makes sense because we are using, as we just discussed, parts of the same technology stack and the same agents and the same data. But I was always wondering about the user. Do you see, we always talk about shift left and what the developers need to do. Is that something developers really care, or what is kind of your user for the tools?
Definitely. So I will tell you that for, Snyk pretty much started from the shift left and from the notion that developers want to work fast, but really not to compromise on security. So in many cases, there is the user and the buyer. Obviously in Snyk, the buyer is the CISO, the AppSec persona, but many of the users that interact with Snyk on their day-to-day basis are the developers that eventually, they need to fix all the issues that we found. And I also think that, generally speaking, we see in many organizations, part of the fact that, head of platform engineering eventually reports to, CIOs, etc. So we definitely see a consolidation also in terms of who owns those domains. But I think, the plate is big enough for everyone, meaning, both for the observability domain, it's enough to do over there, and there is enough consolidation only within observability. There is enough consolidation only within cyber. There are companies that they intersect with that, but I think mainly, it really depends on the user and the buyer, and they are not always the same.
Yeah, makes sense. And how, if you look at the data, are you also looking at the payload these days? Are you looking at the kind of data that is sent? Would you see that this is like user data or credit card information or anything? Is that interesting for you to? Because there's also data observability these days, right? Which really
Correct.
looks in what kind of data is sent and where is it, and also from a security perspective, that can make sense, right? Are you leveraging that, or is it more about dependencies and these things?
So for now, we are not leveraging that. Obviously, that's something that can be done using that technology, and we can examine that. But as I said before, eventually those are different use cases. And we like, as a philosophy, to be the best at the use cases that we target and at the use cases that our customer care about. Is it a possible way to expand? Definitely, but I don't think, it will be relevant for the near future. We have enough use cases to solve that are much more near future, let's say that way. But I do see startups over there, like in the areas of leveraging like payloads and tracing data for data observability and for data security also, definitely.
Yeah, it's a big space, right? There are many startups, companies now that do only that, right? That are more looking at the data and
Correct.
Payload and observing changes and vulnerabilities there. And you talked about, or you mentioned LLMs when it comes to creating the test cases, etc. And I think, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, I saw that guy's new company, Tesla, raised, I think, $125 million, and he's super bullish when it comes to AI and LLMs. So I also know that he had a lot of ideas with Snyk about around these topics. So how do you see LLMs, Gen AI changing the observability and also your product in the future? Are you seeing some disruption, or do you think it's just a tool that will help you somewhere? I'm just curious how you see this space.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't think anyone today can ignore the LLMs. Even, within Snyk, we leverage that to help you do better fixes and to help you do better remediation. So we definitely see it as as an opportunity for us, because also, like I remember I saw like an interview with the Google CEO, I think it was in a few months already, that said that probably 25% of the code base is now being generated by LLMs, right? So it's crazy. So definitely it's here to stay. It will change how we do observability. It will change how we do security. But that's a challenge. We need to do it in a secured way. That's part of the things that we do together today within Snyk. And it also, it provides us with great opportunities to do things differently in a better and faster way, and not only just via chatbots,
Yeah, I'm also not a big fan of, I always call it the new Clippy, right? Some annoying chatbot that will tell you what to do or helps you, and nobody needs it. And and by the way, with the Google, there was an interesting Hacker News thread around that, around the 25%. And one of the Google engineers posted that a lot of the things they're doing is basically code completion, right? Intelligent code completion. And that's counted as AI generated code. So in fact, he said that from the 25%, which sounded like 25% of Google's code is now somehow generated by AI, but this includes code completion, intelligent code completion, which makes it sound much less automated, AI generated, much more like, okay, it's supporting a developer to be faster, right? That's something that's at the moment sometimes really hard to figure out. What is really cool thing and what helps me really generate things, or what is just more or less a little bit of marketing, right? I'm really not sure, especially in our space, how much yet is changed by those LLMs, right? I haven't seen features yet that really impressed me beside annoying creepy type chatbots and using natural language to do queries, etc. I haven't seen this disruption yet, right?
Yeah, me neither. I think we also like explored it back then, and we didn't find something that we felt the use case really made sense and really was, made me say, okay, like no wow effect was there, but I believe it will come, like the industry is making progress in a crazy pace, and I believe it will come, but I'm not, I haven't seen something that got me really excited yet.
Yeah, I had this conversation with Ben Siegelman recently on this podcast, and he said, this is the moment where in 2 years you can seem very stupid if you say something, right? Because depending on how it evolves, it can change a lot, right? If you hit a point where it's much more intelligent than it is today. So what's next? So what do you see as the future of Helios and Snyk? What's your plans for the product?
So within Snyk, we work really hard on making this product accessible for all of our customers and making sure that every Snyk customer can leverage our, ASPM capabilities, our runtime and prioritization capabilities. The feedback from the market is really positive. We're really excited about it. We think there is really a very big opportunity within Snyk to become a generational company, and this is what we really focus on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about your nice visualization? Does it still exist?
So we are working to make it live again, definitely.
I'm looking forward to it because I think it's really a nice piece of design and engineering on there.
Thank you very much.
Eli, this was a nice conversation. Thank you for joining my podcast.
It's been a pleasure, Mirko.
And let's chat when you have released this product into production. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Mirko. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. I'm always sharing new insights and insider knowledge about observability on LinkedIn. You can follow me there for more. The podcast is produced by Zero. We make observability easy for every developer.